Hey guys, what is happening? It's Tom here and welcome back to another video. So today we're gonna answer the most asked question I've ever gotten on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and that is very simply, how do you edit pictures? Now, editing photographs is very subjective. It's not something you can do right or wrong. I'm just gonna basically spend today showing you how I go about doing a basic edit of a few pictures from a recent photo shoot I did for Apex Media. As you guys probably know, and if you don't know, me and Bruno do photographs around the Nürburgring for Apex Media. If that's something that sounds interesting to you, if you want your car photographing in this local area that we live in, send me a message on Instagram. It'll be around here somewhere. And yeah, we'll get you booked in, find a slot and get some wicked pictures of your car. But for now, if you want to see how I go about editing pictures, grab yourself a coffee, grab yourself something to eat, come back, sit down, and we're going to go over to my laptop and I'm going to show you basically how I go about editing pictures. So I hope you guys enjoy the video and let's get started. Okay guys, so welcome to my laptop. I run a 2015 MacBook Pro. That's my personal laptop. The laptop that I run at Apex for work is a 2019 MacBook Pro. That has 32 gig of RAM, this one has 16, so that is the hardware that I use. And the software, I use the Adobe Creative Cloud, I use Lightroom and Photoshop are the two main ones, and then also Bridge for file management. So today we're going to look at a photo shoot that I recently did with James, also known as Mr JWW on YouTube and Instagram. Some of you might know him if you're into your automotive stuff, and if not, go check out his channel. He's got a really cool channel. So the other day he came down to Apex and he brought me his GT3 in crayon. It's actually a manual car. It's a 991.2 and wanted to take some pictures of it. So I took him out and we got some shots of the car. So usually in a photo shoot I'll take hundreds of pictures, but for the purpose of today's video I'm just going to look at four typical pictures that I might take on a photo shoot. So we'll quickly look through them. So here's one of James and the car and Tiergarten in the background. We have one here of the car and the castle. We have one with the car going through the countryside, and then we have a typical rolling shot that myself and Bruno take at Apex Media. So let's get started. So the main thing when taking the picture is to get it right in camera, obviously. That's step number one. It's going to make it a lot easier for when you edit the picture. To do that, it's important that you take a well-exposed picture. So that means that your highlights aren't too blown out and your shadows aren't too dark. And what that's going to be able to do is let you get maximum control of your raw file. So as you see, as I dial up the shadows here, you get a lot of this detail underneath the car is still in the picture. You also have a lot of detail here in the sky. If you pull it down, you can really see that sky coming back in. So that's the main thing. So let's go ahead and I'll just show you what I kind of do in Lightroom with my pictures. Of course, editing is always subjective, so take it as you want. Develop your own style by all means. And this is just what I do, just so you have an insight of the way I work. So first of all, I get a good exposure in the foreground using the exposure slider over here. Something like that I think is really cool, looks good. And then I start dialing in kind of the temperature. So I want to give it a bit of a warmer look. So something like that on the Kelvin slider. And then what I like to do is I just basically like to get the exposure right to start with. So I use the gradient tool up here and I click and drag down. And then that gives me control over this section in a gradient. So I'll reset these sliders for now so we can go from a clean slate. Okay, so let's dial down the exposure. It's going to bring down this blanket of clouds, which is really cool. And then I'm going to dial down the highlights as well to darken it a bit more. And maybe boost the shadows just a little bit, like that. Okay, and then it's time to dial in how I want it to look in terms of colour. So let's go for a cooler look. There we go, you can see the blues coming in there. And then maybe a dash of the greens here as well. Okay. That's looking good, maybe a little bit too dark, so let's just pull it up a little bit. Perfect, that's good. I like that a lot. And then kind of my style is to have a dark lower third as well. So do a similar kind of thing. Click and drag another gradient. I do this one quite subtle, something like that. And again, let's reset these because we want it just to be a darkened gradient. We don't necessarily want to put any color into the foreground at this point. That's good, and let's just dial it down a tad. And what that's going to do is that's going to kind of create a natural vignette. It's going to pull your eye into the subject, which is obviously James and the car. So in terms of exposure, I'm pretty happy with that. So let's go for a bit of alignment. It looks to me a little bit like it's tilted clockwise, so let's just counter that slightly. Something like that. Yeah, looks good. Okay, and then let's go through some of these sliders. So clarity. I always put a little bit of clarity in there just to sharpen up a little bit and give a bit of a stylized look. Saturation is important. Again, you want to be careful when you're doing saturation on people because you don't want to push the skin tones too much. If you push them too much, it's gonna start looking very unrealistic. So that's pretty good. Okay, so next is tone curve. You might have heard online when looking at other people and stuff like that, other photographers, about a term called crushing the blacks. That's when you move your black point up here and you kind of create like an S curve with your line here on your curve. And what that does is it gives you that kind of stylized crushed black effect where the black point is actually moved to kind of more of a grey. If I pull it up, you'll be able to see what I mean. It gives you that kind of editorial commercial look. Again, something very subtle, you don't need to do a lot of it, but something like that's pretty cool. And then you can get really in depth with your colours. So the greens, sometimes I like to give them a hint of yellow. So I pull the hue down. You know, you could boost the saturation, you could lower the saturation, and then play the lumens as well. So something like that looks pretty cool to me. I like that. One thing you've got to be careful of when you're working with grey cars is that the blue tones can actually bleed into the car. As you're boosting the saturation, the car starts to turn a bit blue. So what I like to do is I like to get the blue saturation and just drag it down a touch. And you'll see that changes on the car. So if I just boost up again, you see the blues come into the car, bring it down, just gives it more of that neutral, you know, and you stay true to the colour of the car. That's one thing that's kind of important when you're editing cars, is to make sure that you keep the colour of the car the same. All of these owners of these supercars, they'll often pay a lot of money for these colours, so it's important that we give them the picture with the colour that they actually chose from the factory or from the wrapper or whatever, just to make sure it's, you know, it's exactly what they want. So that is looking pretty good from now, so let's move on to the next picture. Okay, shot number 2, we've got a picture of James's car here in front of the castle and under a tree. I really like shooting in this spot because as the kind of seasons go around, the colours in this tree change all the time and it's really fun to shoot at. So one of my favourite spots. So first of all, let's get the alignment right on this picture. It's a little bit to the left, so let's just get it a bit straighter, something like that. Again, nothing major, but just, you know, gets those lines working correctly. So same kind of thing again, so let's expose the car. So something like that is great. As you can see, it's kind of bleeding out here into the highlights, so let's pull down the highlight slider. There we go, something like that. Boost the contrast a little. That looks good. The picture looks kind of in the blue area, I think you guys might agree. So if we delve up into the yellows, you'll see the image starts warming up. Again, just dropping those highlights a little bit more. Something like that looks pretty cool. Clarity, let's give it a little bit of clarity like before, get it a bit nice and sharp. Saturation, okay, let's boost that a little bit as well. The greens are looking a little bit neon there, but I'll tell you, we'll fix that a little bit later on. And then let's open up a gradient and let's sort out this foreground again. I'll reset the parameters over here on the right hand side. Good, get rid of the clarity, we don't need any more of that, and the saturation. And then what we'll do is we'll just pull this down ever so slightly. Again, just giving that natural vignette, bringing your eye up into the subject. That looks pretty good, I like how that's looking. So let's go to our tone curve again, same thing as you'll see. I kind of go to the same routine when editing all the pictures. It's just my go-to, it's what I like to do. Something like that looks pretty cool. And then the greens, I think are looking too green, so let's bring that down this way. Let's maybe drop the saturation a little bit. And then we can play with the luminance as well. There we go, that looks good. Okay, and the blues, I can see the back of this Porsche is looking a little bit blue. So let's bring that back a little bit. There we go, you can instantly see that's better. Look, if I just do one extreme to the other. You see that? Yeah, that's the colour we want. And then this tree, I'm going to use a gradient again. I'm going to pull it down over this tree. And then what I'm going to use, I'm going to reset these parameters. And I'm going to use this gradient to inject some life into this tree. I think it's a really cool natural border. I really like the composition of this picture. And if I use the exposure to kind of boost some colour into the tree and some brightness, I think it really sets it off. So again, let's just carefully dial that. There we go, a bit of saturation. Yeah, this is looking nice. There you go, twist it a little bit more to this way, make sure it doesn't affect the castle too much. That looks pretty cool. Let's pull down these highlights again. Just want to bring that tree, the castle back in. As you can see, it was getting a little bit bled out when it was up here, so bring that in again. Okay, if we go to the before and after, you'll see just a couple of slides make a really big difference to the picture. Just like this one over here. If we go back to the before and after, you can see. I mean, I think the trick is kind of making the picture seem as realistic as it was when you saw it for your own eye. That is the majority of the pictures I try to do that, but obviously if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see that that isn't always the case, and I like to go quite far with Photoshop. It's something that I really like doing. Okay, so picture number 3. Again, pretty good exposed picture, pretty well exposed picture. As you can see in the histogram, we have, you know, it's a little bit top heavy over here and a little bit dark over here, but generally speaking, I can see from knowing my camera and knowing the capabilities of the raw file that I can pull back all this information here in the foreground, as well as pull it in the shadows and the highlights. Okay, so let's just reset that. So for this, again, let's boost it up a little bit here to get the foreground right, and then let's bring down the highlights a tad. I really want this to be like a warm picture. I mean, I really want to get these trees looking like the sun's bursting through and, you know, giving that really like stylized sunset picture. I can see it's quite cold at the front. So first step, let's use this Kelvin meter to get it more dialed in. Okay, so that now you can see already before and after is already looking a lot more sunset, you know, giving a more of a sunset kind of vibe. So we'll do the exposure, we'll crank up that contrast. That looks pretty good. Clarity, again, you've got to be careful on stuff like this. If you go too far, it's going to look horrible. Too little, it's going to look horrible. So give it something like, I don't know, maybe 5. Just give it a little bit of an edge. I think the really cool thing about this shoot is James wanted to keep all the flies and the rubber on the car just to show that it's being used. You know, he really likes to use his cars and he's proud to show that off, which I think was awesome about that. Let's add a bit of saturation in, not too much, it's already a very saturated image. And then again, let's crush the black. So let's get our black point up. Let's make a little bit of an S-curve. There we go, just play with that a little bit. I mean, that's looking already pretty good. It's very, very oversaturated over here though. So let's go into the yellows. Let's just play with the saturation a little bit. Let me dial it down a tad. That looks a lot more natural. And then we can also play with the luminance as well. I think that looks pretty good. I really like that. So back to the gradient. Let's have a play with this. Let's see what we can do. So we drag this in. Usually we've been using that to make it darker. Sometimes you can do the total opposite and you can make it light as well. So let's boost a bit of light in there. You can see it then creates the kind of effect of the light's bursting through and bleeding into the image, which I really like to do sometimes. But I think something like that's pretty cool. Maybe something like a little bit higher. Again, very subtle, something like that's cool. And then if we go to the bottom of the image, I just want a slight vignette, I want a little bit of darkness on the bottom. Let's dial that in like that. Very good. Okay. Yeah, I really, really like that. Again, before and after, there you go. You can see just a couple of simple slides can go a long way. It's going to change the sky a little bit. Increase the contrast and then drop that a tad. Like that, perfect. Okay, so here we are, the fourth and final image that we're going to edit today from the shoot. This is a full-blown rolling shot. This is the kind of shots that me and Bruno get requested to do the most. When you book a shoot with us at Apex, with me and Bruno, you get us both, and we both do this kind of work, okay? So this is included in the shoot. If you're interested, just drop me a Instagram DM. My Instagram is @TomStamp. You can book us for any time during the week or whatever. We're always working, so we're always happy to shoot whenever you're available. So let's get into it with this shot. Again, very well exposed. I think it's pretty good. You've got the highlights still there in the sky. You have the shadows over here in the foreground. It's just a good base to start with, which is important. So I'm gonna dial the shadows up a little bit. It's gonna bring the detail back in the wheels to start with. And then I'm going to add a bit of contrast. So let's set the mood of this image. Again, the sun was setting, so I want to try and get that back. So we'll add a dab of yellow. With this, we might also add a little bit of green. Just, again, you've got to be very careful with this to make sure it looks about right. You don't want to be changing that color too much. Okay, that looks pretty good starting point. Let's get some information back in these clouds. So again, gradient tool, click and drag from the top. Like that. Apologies for the lag. My laptop can't seem to handle me speaking to you guys and editing at the same time. I've never actually tried this before, so it's a learning curve for me as well. There we go, let's reset that. Bring down those highlights and then dial down a little bit. Again, I think that's pretty good. And then in the foreground, let's do that trademark look I go for with the dark foreground as well. What I like to do on the rolling shots is I like to boost the clarity pretty high, because what that's going to do is it's going to bring out the information here on the road. It gives that, it kind of insinuates and emphasizes the fact that you're moving fast past the subject. It gives you that stylized kind of Evo-esque look, which I really, really like. So okay, that's pretty good for now. We'll leave the saturation for now, and then we'll do our little S-curve down here, crush the blacks. That's looking really nice. I really like that a lot. Again, when taking pictures like this, the composition is very important, and I think with something like this, it shows the car well, shows the angles of the Porsche well. Certain cars photograph differently from certain angles, but for this kind of car, I think this is a really nice angle for it. One thing we're going to use is a radial, and we're going to highlight the wheel just by clicking and dragging. Again, sorry for the lag. And let's invert that and reset the parameters. Now what this is going to do is it's going to allow me just to edit that section of the image, and what I want to do is I want to bring out the exposure, because the wheels are a really cool part of this Porsche. I want to show that off a bit better. So we can do that by boosting shadows, we can do it by boosting the exposure, as you can see me doing now. You just don't want to go too far with it, that's all. A tad of clarity. Okay, there you go. As you can see, that's, a little bit more visible now. You can spend as long as you want doing this. You can spend hours and hours. I'm just doing it very quickly to show you a base edit of how I kind of do things. Again, before and after. Not a massive amount of editing is needed. It just enough to kind of get it to look how you want it and just bring out the potential of what your image holds. Again, you could go down into your HSL and your color. You could change the yellows. You could give it that kind of autumn look. You could pull and make them more green. You can really go as far as you want with it. It's a very powerful platform, Lightroom, and it's something that I use majority of the time, but I'll reset that for now. Okay, so that is a very, very, very brief introduction to how I edit on Lightroom. As you can see, I do the majority of my photography work in Lightroom, but I do use Photoshop to go in and kind of rectify and finalize the images, okay? So for example, this picture here, we have this lovely sign in the corner, which is really taking the focus away. So let's sort that out. So first of all, right click, edit in Adobe Photoshop, and then what that's going to do is it's going to open the file up here in Photoshop. Okay. So first thing I'm going to do is duplicate the background layer by pressing Command and J. I always work on a background layer copy because it's just the best way of being able to go back and change things if anything goes wrong. I'm going to use the spot removal tool over here, and then I'm going to dial the size of the brush with my square brackets, okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to just kind of colour over and brush in to just parts of this sign, and we're going to start working away and getting rid of it. Okay, so there is the first part of the sign. It's amazing how Photoshop's come on. When I started using this program over a decade ago, you know, it was a lot more difficult to do this kind of thing. Right now Adobe have given us the tools to get it done very, very quickly and very easily. And this is basically all you need to do at this point. So you just go across. The trick is to do little bits at a time. If you do too much at once, what will happen is it will just clone, you know, a massive section at once, and it's not going to look right. So going one by one like that, and then there you go, hey presto, the sign has gone. So what I'll do is I'll go before and after, before, after, before, and after. So as you can see, seamless editing, it's really cool. Another bit down here this is getting in my way. I don't like this, so let's get rid of that as well. Again, same thing, just highlight it with the spot removal tool, and then give it a second, bam, gone. I'm going to leave this in here. I actually quite like this. I think it complements colours of the car well. And then that is a finished image. If we go back to this picture here of the car, again, really like the image. This van is getting in the way. So same thing, let's sort that out. Edit in Adobe Photoshop, give it a second to load. And here we have the image here loaded in Photoshop. So let's get in and amongst it. So again, duplicate the background layer by pressing Command and J. And this is going to be a bit more difficult, a bit more time consuming. So what I think I'll do is I'll start a bit of a time lapse and I'll see you at the end. But basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the lasso tool to go around the area that I want to clone. And what that's going to allow me to do is it's going to allow me to keep the wing here in the subject of the wing. It's going to allow me to keep it sharp. I'm going to isolate that from the rest of the image. And what that'll do is it'll allow me to get in with the brush, the clone brush and the spot removal tool, nice and close, without me going in and bleeding into the wing. Okay, so there we are. I've just isolated that. I'm going to right click, going to feather, going to give it a feather of 2 radius, make a new layer, and then maybe color it in something like white. And then what that allows me to do is that I can hide that and I can use that to select the mask at any point without losing this mask. Okay, so we'll select the layer, we'll get the stamp tool, and then we will start kind of brushing it nice and steadily and going steady as we go. And as you can see, we'll start going around the wing and basically just getting rid of this van. So I'll run the time lapse and I'll see you at the end. Okay, so as you can see, not the best example there, but like I say, I'd usually spend a lot longer doing something like that, but you can see, you know, we've actually missed the back of the van there, but I can go back and do that later. But that is kind of how you very, very, very quickly take something out of a picture. And if you didn't know it was there in the first place, I highly doubt you'd actually be able to see it was there when you saw the final edited image. So that was a very, very, very basic start of how I would go about editing a few pictures. Obviously, we only did 4 there. When I do a shoot, I can have anything up to 50 to a couple hundred images, and it takes a lot longer. I can, you know, I can assure you that. So, but I hope that helps some of you guys out, because I know it can be quite a daunting thing. When I started, I had no idea what I was doing on Photoshop or Lightroom. And I hope that kind of gives you guys, you know, a bit of a drive to go and try it. You know, it's go get yourself the free trial. If you don't want to pay for it, get the free trial, try it out for a bit, see if you like it. And yeah, it's a really, really, really powerful platform. Lightroom and Photoshop have both come on so much in recent years. It's basically so much easier now to do what you wanted to do 10 years ago. And then, you know, it's just a really, really awesome thing to do and get involved with. So if any of you guys actually end up using, you know, Lightroom or Photoshop off the back of this video, let me know in the comments below, because I'd be interested to hear out about, you know, how you guys liked it. And if you want me to do anything more with this kind of thing, let me know in the comment section below. Do you want to know about settings on cameras? Do you want to know about lighting? I mean, whatever you want to know about pictures, if I can edit something to help you guys out, then that's what we'll do. So, but that being said, if you enjoyed, like the video, drop me a comment. If you're new, please consider subscribing. It's really cool to have you guys on board. And I will see you guys in the next video, okay? Cheers.